don't have a podium, so I'm going to improvise. Thank you, Chantel, for that introduction. I certainly want to thank Mr. Thurman. Let's give him a big round of applause. I was really honored to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, to be one of the 2015 inductees into the Hall of Fame. And I want to welcome you all certainly to this 5th Annual National Civil Rights Hall of Fame Members and Friends Breakfast. And I really appreciate the fact that this commemorates Dr. Martin Luther King's life. And Mr. Thurman asked me to talk about King, a social agent for change. And with what's happening here in Chicago right now, it's so important for us to recognize that Dr. King really fought for us. He was out there for us. This past Friday, it warmed my heart because I was able to go out. I just could not stay at my house and not go out on Michigan Avenue and support those young people who were really peacefully marching for justice for Laquan McDonald, but also, absolutely, but also, you know, it's not just about Laquan McDonald. It's about all of us. It's about our children. It's about our children's future. So I'm happy to speak to you all this morning. I want to really acknowledge Bishop Jerry Goodloe of Lighthouse Baptist Church, to whom this breakfast, I understand, is being dedicated. And I want to congratulate all of the 2015 and 2016, the 2015 inductees and soon to be inducted in April, the 2016 inductees. Today, I join you paying homage to the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., focusing on the aptly chosen theme, King, an agent for social change. I dedicate this speech to the memory of my parents, David and Dickie Rabb, whose dreams for their children motivated me and my 7 siblings to go to college. I was just talking about education and how education is so important for social change. But they worked very hard for us. Neither of them were educated people, but they sent all 8 of us to college. We went to a historically black college, Southern University. All 8 of us went there. We have amongst us 7 bachelor's degrees, 6 master's degrees, 1 PhD, 2 attorneys, and 1 CPA. All of that within a family of uneducated, Dr. King, Dr. King conceived of a future that would be very different than the one in which he lived. He dreamt of a different reality for humankind, inspired by advocates of nonviolence such as Mahatma Gandhi. King sought equality for African Americans, the economically disadvantaged, and the victims of injustice through peaceful protest. You see, Dr. King, one of the most visible advocates of nonviolence and direct action as methods of social change, he saw that as a method for social change. He was born on January 15, 1929, and he came of age in the 40s and the 50s. Although his short but spectacular life was ended April 4th, 1968, he lived through one of the most racially turbulent times of our country. Throughout America's history, many people, both black and white, fought against racial inequality. There was Frederick Douglass, an African American who escaped slavery. Known for his extraordinary oratorical skills, he became a leader of the abolitionist movement. Douglass was so influential that he conferred with President Abraham Lincoln, which after 3 years, Abraham Lincoln, who conferred the Declaration, the Emancipation Proclamation, which after 3 years of civil war declared all slaves free. In Confederate territories, effective January 1st, 1863. Slavery everywhere in the United States was outlawed by the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865. The end of slavery did not end racial turmoil in America. Progress made during the Reconstruction period was followed by a severe backlash of racial intolerance and terrorism inherent in the establishment of the Black Code and then the Jim Crow laws, which were enacted at local and state levels in the United States from 1876 to 1965. Imposed segregation of the races led to the separate but equal doctrine in public schools, which was challenged by Brown versus Board of Education and declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in 1954. Subsequently, groups seeking civil rights began to attack Jim Crow statutes in the federal courts, and those laws began to be overturned on constitutional grounds. From within this atmosphere of racial divisiveness and social upheaval, Martin Luther King Jr. emerged with a dream about the possibility of peace and brotherhood. Dr. King said, "We must learn to live together as brothers, or perish together as fools." He caught the attention of the world and appealed to like-minded men and women, forming what he would call a coalition of conscience. Propelled by the will of a sea of humanity that was ready to live united with one dream and one purpose, Dr. King dedicated the peaceful March on Washington, where he delivered before 250,000 people his powerful I Have a Dream speech. As one of the driving forces behind the March on Washington, it was at this march Dr. King delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech, which solidified his status as a social change leader and helped encourage a nation to act on civil rights. Dr. King was later named Time Magazine's Man of the Year. Dr. King said, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." Martin Luther King's speech for us is as humble as it is beautiful. Ultimately, he believed that everyone can start something right now to change the world. In 1964, at 35 years old, Martin Luther King Jr. became the youngest person to win the Nobel Peace Prize. His acceptance speech in Oslo is considered by many to be among the most powerful remarks ever delivered at the event, climaxing at one point with the often quoted phrase, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality." This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant. The recognition that followed from these and other honors prompted journalists and politicians from around the world to seek King's views on a wide range of issues. Even so, King remained focused on the 22 million Negroes of the United States of America engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice, as he stated in his Nobel Peace Prize speech. Today, his accomplishments are now instilled in American children of all races, and his profound philosophies are studied by scholars and students worldwide. Dr. King has used the powerful words paired with acts of nonviolent resistance, such as grassroots organizing, protests, and civil disobedience to accomplish seemingly impossible goals of social change. In my journey to become the first African-American clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County, Illinois, one of the largest unified court systems in the world, I too
have relied on divine purpose and the need of wanting change. You see, I come from very humble beginnings, born and raised in a small rural town, Minden, Louisiana. My parents were poor and uneducated, and we were all subjected to racial inequality and forced segregation. As a child in my hometown, also I saw signs that read, for colors only, for whites only, and many times I felt the sting of racial injustice. Even the restaurant, the cafe that my mother worked, we had to go around to the back, and I saw the color only signs because colors were serviced in the back. But my parents and thousands of other people across the country were soon to be inspired by the man who was perceived as the drum major for justice, peace, and righteousness. I remember the day when I walked downtown in the march, just like I walked downtown in Chicago on Friday, in the march, holding my father's hand when we marched with James Foreman, who had been sent to Minden by Martin Luther King. It was right before the Voting Rights Act was signed, and I probably was only about 12 years old. And it was just phenomenal to play a part. I remember taking water to my teenage sisters when they marched on the picket line because the AMP would not hire anyone of African American descent. My family led the civil rights movement in my hometown. My uncle, J.D. Hampton, is recognized right now in Minden for being the first African American to ever have the courage to run for mayor of that little town back in the 60s. So, ladies and gentlemen, I come from a family of courage in the civil rights movement. Dr. King would courageously step into the role of civil rights leader. However, the civil rights revolution is also the story of many ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Students and sharecroppers, seamstresses and senior citizens, preachers, workers, and countless others courageously led the country towards democracy. The fact is, faith in the righteousness of Dr. King's dream became the driving force of people of all races, backgrounds, and circumstances. And they knew, as Dr. King did, that this journey would not be easy. It will be arduous and difficult. As Dr. King said, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step towards the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertion of passionate concern of dedicated individuals. Dr. King knew he was destined to shift the course of humanity. I challenge you to watch any Martin Luther King speech, and you will perceive a man who recognized that he was living out his divine purpose. It was this belief and acceptance that propelled as he witnessed churches being bombed and peaceful marchers being assaulted. It was this same belief that powered his prophetic oration at the March on Washington. It was the same belief for which Dr. King ultimately gave his life. Now I will share with you a personal story about divine purpose, so you can know that what you can make happen when you strongly believe in yourself. In college, when I decided to major in accounting in 1971, my big sister told me I had to be the best because I was going into this with 2 strikes against me. I was black, I am black, and I am a woman. So I worked hard as my parents taught me, and I graduated #1 in the College of Business, #1 in the Department of Accounting, #4 in the entire university. But I didn't get a job offer from any major accounting firm right out of college. The gentleman that I tutored got the job offer. What happens when #1 is not good enough, young people? Do you go over into the corner and cry? Do you give up? Or do you just keep on pushing?